pleasure of welcoming Dmitri and Anna Shelest. They are a piano duo, and they are also a married couple. And we're going to talk about their native Ukraine. They're both from Ukraine, and they put out a CD a couple of years ago called Ukrainian Rhapsody, and they've reissued it in solidarity with the Ukrainians during the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. First of all, let me welcome the two of you and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Nice to be with you.
Yeah. So you're both from Ukraine, right? And from Kharkiv is where you're from? Okay. So that's a city that's been in the news along with Kyiv as being invaded by the Russians. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about what's going on right now? We're a little over a month, I believe, into the war, and do you have family still in Ukraine? I mean, what's going on with that?
Dmitri, you want to? I can speak about this. Yes, we both come from Kharkiv. I was born in Kharkiv. Dmitri was born kind of in a smaller town outside of the city. But this is the town where I grew up. I went to school there. Dmitri and I got married in Kharkiv. We already lived in the United States, but we had our wedding in Kharkiv, one of the big cathedrals. And it's also a place where we would try to go back almost every summer. We have two young children, two young boys, and we wanted to make sure they know their heritage. They met their great-grandparents. Their grandparents live in Kharkiv. They have many cousins, many uncles and aunts, and just a really big, wonderful family. So it's just very, very personal for us what is happening. So it's been the worst months, I think, of our lives, just to not being able to do anything for them. But they're staying very strong. I think the whole world sees the Ukrainian spirit, how people are strong. They are fighting. They are really ready to do anything for the country, for the community. And they really stay in very good spirits. When we talk to them from bomb shelters, they're able to joke, sometimes even cheer us up. When we tell them how worried we are, they say, well, we're doing well, don't worry, things are, they're staying so hopeful. It's just amazing for us to see them going through this absolutely terrible struggle. But I think everyone is just hoping and dreaming for the peace to come, so they can start rebuilding their lives and just building a more, even better, more prosperous, more peaceful Ukraine. So this is we're trying to think about that aspect, but it's been really, really difficult, and it's just a real tragedy with what's happening.
Well, I think your album of Ukrainian music by Ukrainian composers, addresses the culture of Ukraine to a certain extent, and also exposes Western audiences to music they may not have been familiar with. That was certainly the case with myself, listening to these different works. Now, I know that obviously the re-release of this album was precipitated by the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. But what led you exactly to do that? I mean, was it somebody's idea in particular, or did somebody approach you, or did you come up with the idea of re-releasing it?
To release it, or
no, the
release
second
it
time
in the
around.
first place?
I mean, there was obviously conflicts going on already the first time around, and now we have this.
Well, I think it was several organizations, our label. They were very supportive the first time when we just came up with this idea. We offered this program, and I think now people are just, I think, ready to maybe have some positive news from Ukraine as well. And I think having music is just something that can perhaps offer a little bit more kind of hopeful message during these times. And we are grateful that we can speak about our culture again, and the people are interested in this. I wish it was better circumstances, but
right.
this is really the cause.
Well, Dmitri, your sound is working, right? I haven't heard from you yet.
Yes, and I think I wanted to add to Anna's point that obviously this is a tragic circumstance, but still this is, overnight Ukraine became the world spotlight. And not only did the whole world sympathize and was rooting for Ukraine, but their interest was piqued by the actual country and its culture and its people and its voice. So I think we use this opportunity to talk about music in Ukraine, since people were paying attention and eager to learn more about, because clearly the ideology of the past, when for some time in history it was considered that Ukraine is a part of a bigger group, going back decades and centuries, of course. Now, of course, it couldn't become clearer with the invasion that it's really not the same, part of the same group anymore. And therefore, putting this CD out there and this music out there is something that we wanted to do to show the voice of Ukraine, and something that isn't really a current thing, but something that historically does go back centuries.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of American audiences do, as you say, kind of confuse the heritage of certain composers and the cultures of Russia and Ukraine. They look at Ukrainian composers and think of them as Soviet composers or what have you. So this album, I think, goes a long way towards delineating, the culture of Ukraine, the music of Ukraine, compared to what was going on in Russia at the time. I want to talk about the 4 different composers you have on this disc. They're all very different, but connected somehow. And you begin with Mikola Lisenko. I'll let you pronounce that, because I'm not going to pronounce any of these names correctly.
That's good.
And Anna, you played this wonderful suite on Ukrainian themes by him, and then you joined forces for the Tarash Bulba Overture, I believe it is. Yeah. To the opera by Lisenko. I wonder if you can talk about who he was and his relevance to Ukrainian history and culture.
Yes, of course. Well, Mikola Lisenko, he's really considered to be like a father of Ukrainian music. He really made a huge effort throughout his whole life to establish Ukrainian music as kind of its own very unique voice within kind of European tradition. So he studied in Europe. He really wanted to have Ukrainian identity be extremely clear in his music. He was also an ethnomusicographer. He recorded over 500 Ukrainian folk songs, and you can say that kind of DNA of his music is Ukrainian folklore. And this particular piece on the recording, when I first came across this, the first thought I had was that this is Ukrainian voice trying to join European voice. And this was actually after this conflict with Russia began in 2014 with annexation of Crimea. This is when we kind of were beginning to really getting a little bit more deeply interested in Ukrainian music and what makes something Ukrainian versus, as you were saying earlier, kind of Russian or kind of this bigger school. So with this piece, I thought it was just kind of symbolic of Ukrainian struggle to join Europe throughout centuries. And with this piece, with Lisenko taking Ukrainian tunes, Ukrainian folk songs that many Ukrainians would know. Like if you would hear this, they would be able to hum, and maybe like my grandmother, for example, she would know the words to all of those songs. And then make these folk songs into art. So I thought that was just a really relevant message. It was kind of incredible that the struggle that it has been going on for so long, and this piece is kind of a testament of that.
Yeah.
And the second piece, the Overture to Taras Bulba, that is a very significant piece in Ukraine. It's one of the most beloved kind of big orchestra works. So we were very excited when we came across this arrangement that was actually done by Revutsky, who was a student of Lisenko. And interesting story about this opera, Taras Bulba, is that Tchaikovsky, he really admired Lisenko. He wanted to advocate for his music, and he wanted to help to stage opera Taras Bulba in St. Petersburg in the Russian Imperial Theater. But under one condition, it had to be translated into Russian. And Lisenko, he refused. He really wanted to draw the line between kind of Russian identity and Ukrainian identity, and the language is one of the most powerful ways to do it. So throughout his whole life, he was always taking a stand for Ukraine. He had to forego many opportunities, because if he was a little bit more willing to negotiate with the Russian way, he might have had more opportunities. But for him, for example, he could never get published in Ukraine. He was published in Europe because of that reason, that he wanted all of his songs, his operas to be published in Ukrainian. So this arrangement, again, it's very significant to Ukrainians, people who know about Lisenko and this particular story. But I think it also has kind of a wonderful patriotic and kind of victorious quality. And we were just happy that we have this arrangement for piano for hands that also carries a kind of deeper meaning for us.
You mentioned the duo piano arrangement is by Revutsky, who you also have on here with his own music, yeah. And you also have Alexander Shuk. Now, I think it's interesting that you start with Lisenko and with familiar kind of folk tunes, and then you end with Miroslav Skorik, who is really famous, top of the cream of the crop composers in Ukraine. And, you know, he wrote that beautiful melody for that film soundtrack, which everybody in Ukraine knows.
Yes.
I will admit that I didn't start listening to it until I started listening to this album and researching the composers. But it's a beautiful piece that kind of reflects the folk melodies of Ukraine. And it's been done so many times by different performers and orchestras and what have you for Ukraine right now during the war in Russia. I wonder if we can skip over those two composers in the middle, because I'm curious why you went with those. But also, can you talk about Miroslav Skorik, who I guess he's passed away? Yeah, at the time you did the recording, he was still alive. Yeah.
Oh yes, he was very much alive and active as a composer back in 2018 when we were working on the recording, and we actually had a chance to talk with him on the phone once and to meet him later. And he was very generous with his time and very supportive. And I basically got a hold of his cell phone through a friend of a friend, and I called him up in Ukraine. And he took all the time I wanted, I needed. And he wasn't in that conversation, he was kind of very laid back and easy and just kind of grateful that people all over the world pay attention and love his music. And I asked him some advice because it was, you know, a new piece for us. And like with much of new music, there's little or no frame of reference as to, you know, where do you take, where do you go with it? But he really didn't want to impose too much of his own ways of interpreting it on us. So he basically let us run with it. And we were grateful for that kind of easy approach. And then interestingly enough, well, one of the bummers, so to say, was that this conversation was happening in February of 2018. And in March of 2018, we were due to have a CD release recital at Weill Hall in the Carnegie Hall. And we invited him, of course, to that. And the worst thing was that he was scheduled to come to New York, but 5 days later, and he couldn't change the travel arrangements. So he would have loved to be at that concert, of course, but we were still lucky to meet with him and hear him at a concert a few days later when he came for his 80th birthday celebration here at the Ukrainian Institute of America in New York. And he played some of his other four-hand pieces, and he accompanied some other chamber works. And yes, we did get a chance to meet him, and he was gracious and supportive, and that's the memory we'll cherish. But regarding his music, it's just kind of, these extravagant dances, they're very much tongue-in-cheek, they're very lighthearted. It's really not something that Miroslav Skorik in general is as a composer, because he wrote, cantatas, symphonies and so much religious music and much serious. Yet this was something that proved that he could do so many contrasting things.
Yeah, I went back and listened to some of his like early film scores, that he wrote when he was in his 20s, and they're completely different from what you're talking about, the more serious music, but they have a kinship with these particular extravagant dances that the two of you play together. It's a lot of fun to listen to. I wonder if we could take just a moment to talk about the two of you as duo pianists. Now, you've known each other since you were kids, right? But you didn't form the piano duo until much later.
That's right. We met as middle school students in Kharkiv, Ukraine, when we were both 12 years old. And so we were classmates, and we had a lot of friends in common and teachers in common and all that. So we were friends and fellow students, but we formed our duo around the time we got married here in the United States. I don't know if I'm missing any detail on it.
But who proposed to who?
Oh.
You mean what, marriage or duo?
I'm talking about the marriage. I guess the duo came later, according to Dmitri.
Yes.
It did. It's actually, I guess I could answer that question because honestly, it's kind of an embarrassment that it was kind of neither, because we knew each other for so long, and then it's just, I guess we just said, well, we're getting married, right? It was that kind of a natural evolution of our friendship. Yeah. So yeah, I know I should have and all, but it happened without.
That's great though. That my grandparents have the exact same story. They weren't pianists, but they did the same thing as far as getting married. It's interesting. Anna, do you want to talk about Revutsky and Alexander Shuk, who wrote the title track of this CD? These are composers that I really was not familiar with. I wonder if you can talk about them and their place on this recording.
Yes, well, Revutsky is quite a famous composer for Ukrainians. I kind of always remember hearing his name. I think when we came across the Taras Bulba arrangement, I just thought, well, he made an arrangement. I have to look into Revutsky's music now. It would be just such a wonderful connection because he was a student of Lisenko. And his music, again, it does have, because he was student of Lisenko, it does have this kind of DNA of that. It's this kind of Ukrainian identity, but it's much more hidden, maybe not as obvious as with Lisenko when you just hear that this is based on folk music. With Revutsky, it's much more kind of underneath. I thought when putting the program together about kind of this connection with Europe, and these preludes, I think, were obviously influenced by Chopin preludes. After Chopin, all composers, couldn't be helped by, but being influenced by his great opus. There is just a great variety in moods and characters in these pieces. And I just thought it makes a great contrast to Lisenko. And with Alexander Zhuk, this is actually the first piece of Ukrainian music that I played as a teenager. I learned this piece in Kharkiv. And I thought at that time, when you are getting into these virtuosic works, one of the really favorite things for you to play are Liszt rhapsodies, Liszt Hungarian rhapsodies. This is like what all kids are crazy about. We all want to play something that is incredibly flashy. There is a lot of, tricks. It's a lot of fun. And this is what attracted me to this piece when my teacher gave it to me, because it kind of had all these qualities of Liszt's rhapsodies. And I had such incredible time playing it. I remember all my friends liked it, this piece. And it's just connecting Ukrainian voice, maybe joining as a Ukrainian voice with Europe. I thought it was just it's a nice way to bring it all together. But the most meaningful thing for me, of course, was connection with Kharkiv. And about Alexander Zhuk, I wasn't able to find out actually a lot about him. I know that he taught in Kharkiv. I knew people who knew him. I think he comes from a family of musicians. So he was one of those people who taught, who performed, who wrote music in Kharkiv. So it was just a way to bring a little bit of our hometown on the recording.
Yeah, that's nice. Well, I'm going to finish by asking you kind of a difficult question, but it's one that I think artists and musicians have thought about for many, many years. I mean, what is the role of music and art and culture when it comes to the current situation, when it comes to war, when it comes to politics and conflict between countries? I mean, how do you view yourselves as speaking to that with your music?
Well, it was quite difficult for us to feel that we can be of any use to anyone, quite frankly, when the war started, because even when we would speak to our families, like there was nothing we could do. We could just ask them how they are, but it was just such a kind of helpless place. And I did feel like, learning to playing piano, it's just like no use to anyone. Like, why would anybody would want to do this? It was just but then I noticed that how many very meaningful gestures from other musicians meant a lot to me. Like one would be when Metropolitan Opera Chorus, they sang a Ukrainian anthem. I was so moved by that, and I sent this recording to my relatives in Ukraine, and I saw that this is something that makes a difference for people, and it kind of gave me hope that we could do something. And I see now our role is that what we can play piano, I can learn music, I can read music, and this is the way we can contribute to Ukrainian voice. I think also we've been paying close attention to Ukrainian news. That's kind of what we're watching every day, constantly. All of the Zelensky's everyday addresses, and I see how important it is for Ukrainians that the world knows about them, that people remember, that they know that these things are happening, and perhaps musicians, our place could be just keeping Ukraine on different agendas, not just the war, but I think cultural front, it can play a role. And I don't know, maybe Dmitri, you can add something.
Yeah, and this is something that we see even in Ukraine when they show these absolutely heartbreaking but at the same time uplifting videos of a cellist in the main square playing among ruins, and we could see how it is, how it lifts people's spirits. And even though they're doing incredibly well in their spirit, looking past this whole nightmare whenever it's over, but we see that it does speak to them. It does symbolize that people from all over the world are there in spirit, in their thoughts and prayers of the Ukrainian people. And so if that's the least we can do, well, so be it.
Yeah. Well, I think that it raises awareness for listeners here in the States to enjoy your music and learn something about it. And through conversations like this, I want to compliment you, Anna, on wearing the Ukrainian flag colors on
Thank
on
you.
your shirt
Yes.
there. That's very nice. I see you also have them on the CD, which I printed out the back cover there.
Yeah, it's a little more subtle on the CD, I think, right? And I think at that time, maybe not the whole world realized what are the colors of the flag, but now I think we all know.
Well, I have the blue. I didn't have anything yellow to wear, so I'll have to next time maybe. Dmitri and Anna Shelest, who have just re-released their album Ukrainian Rhapsody. My thanks to both of you for spending some time and talking about all the music on this disc, as well as the ongoing conflict in Ukraine with Russia, and also best wishes, our thoughts and prayers with your family and your relatives in Ukraine. But thanks to both of you for sharing this wonderful music.
Thank you
Thanks
so much.
for having us.